He was Superman, an indestructible hero to millions. Yet, George Reeves died from a single gunshot, leaving behind a mystery that forever overshadowed his iconic life. In the quiet, dark hours after midnight on June 16, 1959, a single, sharp gunshot echoed from the upstairs bedroom of a modest home tucked away at 1579, Benedict Canyon Drive in Beverly Hills. Downstairs, a bizarrely casual gathering of guests paused mid-drink, entirely aware that George Reeves, the rugged, charismatic actor adored by millions of children as television's original Superman, lay dead or dying directly above them. Did the world's most invincible superhero truly take his own life in a fit of career despair, or was he systematically executed by a shadow world of Hollywood fixers, jilted lovers, and mob-connected elites? When police officers finally arrived at the scene after a highly irregular delay, they found the 45-year-old actor slumped naked on his bed, a heavy .30 caliber Luger pistol resting between his feet on the floor. The initial scene presented to the arriving patrolman seemed to scream of a definitive, self-inflicted tragedy, but beneath the surface lay a web of anomalies that would trouble criminal investigators for decades. There were no powder burns on Reeves' skin, no fingerprints ever recovered from the weapon, and the entry wound in his temple showed no signs of the typical close-contact trauma associated with a standard suicide. Yet, even as the body was being carried out into the cool morning air, the guests downstairs were offering conflicting timelines of what had occurred, their statements shifting with every drink they consumed. For a generation of Americans who viewed Reeves as the ultimate symbol of truth, justice, and absolute invulnerability, the sordid reality of his death was an impossible pill to swallow. The immediate rush by the Los Angeles Police Department to label the case a closed tragedy only fueled a growing, dark suspicion that the ultimate hero had been trapped in a real-world web of deception, setting off a controversy that would permanently stain the glitter of old Hollywood. To understand the absolute devastation that gripped the global public when the news of George Reeves' death broke, one must understand the unique and unprecedented grip he held on the cultural imagination of the 1950s. As the star of The Adventures of Superman, Reeves was not just a successful working actor, he was a living, breathing god to an entire generation of post-war children who tuned in every week to watch him bend steel in his bare hands and leap tall buildings in a single bound. He took the responsibility of his role with an immense, almost sacred seriousness, carefully maintaining his public image, refusing to smoke or drink in front of young fans, and routinely visiting hospitals to bring joy to paralyzed children. His deep, booming voice and reassuring smile made him a trusted, paternal fixture in millions of living rooms across the United States, the United Kingdom, and Canada. He possessed an incredible, athletic physicality and a classic, square-jawed handsomeness that perfectly embodied the idealistic optimism of mid-century America. Yet, the vast gulf between the invincible, clean-cut hero he portrayed on television and the gritty, complex reality of his private life in Hollywood was immense. While children saw a man who could deflect bullets with his chest, those within the industry saw a deeply frustrated, aging contract player trapped in a red cape, struggling to pay his mortgage and desperately searching for a way to escape the shadow of his own iconic character. This profound duality meant that his violent end was not merely a shocking celebrity obituary, it was a deeply traumatic rupture in the collective innocence of a generation, a dark realization that even the strongest man in the universe could be broken by the unseen forces operating behind the bright lights of the studio system. Long before he donned the iconic blue tights and red cape, George Reeves was a highly promising, sophisticated dramatic actor who seemed destined for the highest echelons of cinematic stardom. Born George Brewer, he possessed a natural, commanding screen presence and an impressive theatrical training that caught the eye of legendary producer David O. Selznick, who cast him in a minor but unforgettable role as one of the red-haired Tarleton twins in the 1939 cinematic masterpiece Gone with the Wind. That prestigious debut should have been the launch pad for a legendary career as a romantic leading man, and for a brief period, Reeves secured contracts with major studios like Warner Brothers and Paramount, appearing alongside stars like James Cagney and Claudette Colbert. However, his upward trajectory was abruptly halted by the outbreak of World War II, during which he served honorably in the U.S. Army Air Forces, performing in patriotic Broadway shows and training films. When he returned to civilian life in the late 1940s, the Hollywood landscape had shifted dramatically, and the choice leading roles were suddenly going to a new generation of younger method actors. Facing mounting financial pressures and a lack of creative opportunities, Reeves reluctantly accepted a low-paying offer in 1951 to star in a low-budget independent film called Superman and the Mole Men, which served as the pilot for the subsequent television series. He viewed the project as a temporary, mercenary gig to keep his bills paid, fully expecting the infant medium of television to fail or pass unnoticed. Instead, the show became an overnight, astronomical phenomenon, catapulting him into an inescapable level of global fame that would simultaneously build his financial security and completely destroy his dreams of ever being recognized as a serious dramatic artist. The massive, global success of The Adventures of Superman quickly transformed from a professional blessing into a suffocating, creative prison that George Reeves grew to deeply resent. Because he was so utterly convincing and universally recognized as the Man of Steel, casting directors across Hollywood completely refused to consider him for any other roles, fearing that audiences would laugh out loud at the sight of Superman appearing in a gritty western or a sophisticated noir drama. He was utterly typecast, trapped in a relentless production schedule that demanded he pump out dozens of episodes a year for meager pay under a highly restrictive contract with producer Whitney Ellsworth. Reeves found himself performing dangerous, exhausting physical stunts on poorly secured sets, all while earning a salary that was a fraction of what radio and film stars commanded. When the series finally went on an extended hiatus in the late 1950s, he attempted to salvage his artistic dignity by directing episodes and pursuing independent projects, but the phone at his Benedict Canyon home remained stubbornly silent. He was a proud, highly capable 45-year-old actor who found himself reduced to making humiliating public appearances at county fairs and shopping center openings, wearing the padded costume to entertain screaming toddlers just to secure a paycheck. This profound professional humiliation took a massive, invisible toll on his mental health, leading to dark periods of profound self-doubt and financial anxiety. He began referring to the costume as his velvet handcuffs, a golden cage that stripped him of his artistic identity and left him completely dependent on a juvenile character he had grown to utterly detest, setting the stage for a deep psychological crisis that many skeptics believe ultimately led him to the edge of the bed with a loaded weapon. As his professional life stalled, George Reeves' private world became entangled in a complex, high-stakes romantic triangle that would place him directly in the crosshairs of Hollywood's most dangerous power players. For several years, Reeves lived in a state of high luxury as the kept lover of Toni Mannix, a glamorous, highly sophisticated former showgirl who was decades older than him. Toni was deeply, obsessively infatuated with the younger actor, using her immense wealth to buy him his Benedict Canyon house, a luxury station wagon, and a lavish lifestyle that his meager television salary could never have sustained. Their passionate, highly public affair was one of Hollywood's worst-kept secrets, an arrangement that Reeves comfortably accepted for years until the psychological weight of dependency grew too heavy to bear. In late 1958, determined to assert his independence and find a partner closer to his own age, Reeves abruptly and brutally broke Toni's heart, leaving her devastated and humiliated in the eyes of Hollywood society. He quickly threw himself into a whirlwind, high-intensity romance with Leonore Lemon, a fast-living, wealthy New York socialite with a notorious reputation for volatile behavior and late-night barroom brawls. Lemon moved into the Benedict Canyon home as his official fiancée, introducing a chaotic, alcohol-fueled energy into his domestic routine that starkly contrasted with the refined, protective luxury that Toni Mannix had previously provided. This sudden shift in alliances created a highly volatile domestic atmosphere, leaving a scorned, deeply powerful older woman nursing a broken heart in the background, while an unpredictable, short-tempered fiancé managed his daily life, a dangerous domestic mix that many independent investigators believe was a clear recipe for disaster. The true danger of George Reeves' romantic entanglement did not stem from Toni Mannix herself, but from the terrifyingly powerful man to whom she was legally married, Eddie Mannix, the notorious and legendary general manager of Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer. Eddie Mannix was not a typical studio executive. He was Hollywood's ultimate fixer, a ruthless, iron-fisted enforcer with deep, well-documented ties to organized crime syndicates and local law enforcement agencies. For decades, it was Eddie's specific job to make sure that the scandals, murders, abortions, and secret crimes of MGM's biggest stars were quietly and completely erased before they could reach the public press. He operated with absolute impunity, utilizing a private network of corrupt private detectives, compromised police captains, and intimidated journalists to manipulate evidence and manufacture airtight alibis. Remarkably, Eddie was fully aware of his wife's long-term affair with George Reeves, openly permitting the relationship to continue because his own private life was filled with mistresses and secret arrangements. However, when Reeves brutally dumped Toni, leaving her in a state of public, hysterical grief that threatened to disrupt the delicate social balance of the Mannix estate, the dynamic shifted from a tolerated arrangement to an intolerable insult to the Mannix name. Eddie Mannix was a man who did not tolerate threats to his household or his public authority, and he possessed the operational capability to destroy a career or eliminate a person with a single, quiet phone call to his underworld contacts. This formidable presence hovering in the background of Reeves' life has led decades of conspiracy theorists to wonder whether the ultimate Hollywood fixer deployed his dark talents to orchestrate a definitive, permanent solution to his wife's public humiliation. The evening of Monday, June 15, 1959, began as a typical, alcohol-heavy night inside the cramped confines of the Benedict Canyon home. George Reeves and his fiancée Leonore Lemon spent the early part of the night drinking heavily at a local restaurant before returning home, where they were later joined around midnight by an unexpected group of guests, including a neighbor named Carol Vaughn Ronkel and a house guest named William Bliss. Despite the late hour, the gathering continued in the downstairs living room, with the liquor flowing freely and the atmosphere growing increasingly tense and unpredictable. Witnesses later noted that Reeves appeared to be in an uncharacteristically dark, volatile mood, his patience worn thin by the excessive drinking and the uninvited presence of late-night revelers in his home. He briefly came downstairs in his bathrobe, aggressively confronting the guests about the volume of their noise and demanding that the party come to an end so he could get some sleep. However, after a brief, tense exchange, he softened slightly, pouring himself a final drink and exchanging a few strained words with Lemon before turning on his heel and heading back up the narrow stairs to his bedroom. Downstairs, the remaining guests continued to chat and drink, entirely unaware that the final grains of sand were slipping through the hourglass of the actor's life. The exact psychological temperature in that house during those final minutes remains a subject of intense debate. Was Reeves a man driven to the absolute brink of despair by the chaos in his living room, or was he a completely unsuspecting target retiring to a space that had already been breached by a lethal threat? What happened next in the minutes leading up to the fatal shot remains one of the most chilling and hotly contested sequences in the history of Hollywood true crime. According to the official statements later provided to the police by Leonore Lemon, the moment George Reeves walked up the stairs, she turned to the remaining guests and made an incredibly bizarre, predictive announcement: "He's going to go upstairs and shoot himself." Within moments of her uttering those terrifyingly specific words, a heavy, muffled thud echoed through the ceiling boards from the bedroom directly above them. William Bliss, startled by the sound, reportedly made a move toward the stairs, but Lemon allegedly stopped him, casually remarking, "See, he's opening a drawer to get the gun." A few seconds later, the definitive, deafening crack of a single gunshot blasted through the house, instantly silencing the ambient noise of the party below. When the guests finally rushed up the stairs and burst into the bedroom, they found the television star lying flat on his back on the bed, a massive head wound bleeding profusely onto the sheets, and his heavy Luger pistol resting on the floor between his feet. The sheer precision of Lemon's predictive commentary on the events upstairs has long horrified independent researchers. How could a woman guess with such absolute, second-by-second accuracy the exact suicidal intentions of her partner unless she was entirely familiar with a pre-existing plan? Or unless she was actively setting up a chillingly effective alibi for a crime that was happening with her direct complicity. When the Los Angeles Police Department finally arrived at the Benedict Canyon residence, they were confronted with a crime scene that was a chaotic mess of physical anomalies and investigative red flags. The most shocking discovery was made by a junior officer who noticed 2 additional bullet holes embedded deep into the bedroom floorboards directly beneath the bed, along with the corresponding spent casings found hidden under a nearby rug. When questioned about these extra shots, Leonore Lemon casually explained that she had accidentally fired the weapon during a domestic dispute with Reeves a few days prior, an explanation that the detectives remarkably accepted without any further forensic analysis or ballistic verification. Furthermore, the positioning of the body itself was highly unusual for a standard suicide. Reeves was lying perfectly flat on his back, his arms resting neatly at his sides, rather than collapsed in a natural, slumped posture that typically follows an instantaneous fatal head wound. The heavy .30 caliber Luger pistol was found completely wiped clean of any viable fingerprints, a physical impossibility if a dying man had just used his bare hands to pull the heavy trigger and subsequently dropped the weapon to the floor. Most damning of all was the substantial delay in calling the authorities. The guests inside the house waited nearly 45 minutes after the fatal shot was fired before dialing the police station, a critical window of time during which phone calls were made, clothes were shifted, and physical evidence could have been systematically manipulated or removed from the room entirely. Despite the massive pile of physical contradictions and the highly suspicious behavior of the witnesses inside the house, the Los Angeles Police Department moved with a frantic, almost desperate speed to close the case permanently. Within less than 48 hours of the shooting, before the official autopsy results were even typed or the ballistic reports finalized, the department publicly announced that George Reeves' death was a clear, uncomplicated case of suicide brought on by severe career depression. The chief of detectives explicitly stated to the press that there was absolutely no evidence of foul play, effectively shutting down any further investigative efforts by the homicide squad. There was no yellow crime scene tape placed around the property, no systematic forensic dusting for fingerprints on the downstairs doors, and no formal, recorded interrogations of the neighbors or the delivery drivers who had visited the house earlier that day. The witnesses were allowed to leave the station after providing brief, uncorroborated statements, their stories accepted as absolute gospel truth by a department that seemed remarkably eager to avoid a high-profile murder trial in the heart of Beverly Hills. To the mainstream media, the narrative was successfully packaged and delivered, the tragic, predictable collapse of a washed-up actor who couldn't handle the loss of his youth and fame. But to seasoned crime reporters and Hollywood insiders, the frantic speed of the official closing looked like a classic example of a studio-directed fix, a coordinated effort to bury a dangerous truth before it could explode into a major institutional scandal. When independent forensic pathologists and legal experts began reviewing the official medical files of the George Reeves case decades later, they uncovered a series of scientific gaps that shattered the validity of the suicide ruling. The most glaring forensic omission was the complete lack of any gunpowder residue or tattooing around the entry wound in Reeves' right temple. When a person holds a firearm directly against their own skin and pulls the trigger, the resulting blast leaves a definitive, unmistakable pattern of burned powder and skin searing that is impossible to wash away. The complete absence of these marks strongly suggested that the weapon was fired from a distance of at least several feet away from his head. Furthermore, no forensic testing was ever performed on George Reeves' hands to check for the presence of barytic powder burns, a standard test that would have scientifically proven whether he had fired a weapon that night. The autopsy report also noted the presence of several severe, unexplained bruises across Reeves' face and torso, physical trauma that indicated he had been involved in a violent physical altercation shortly before the fatal shot was fired. These injuries were completely ignored by the original investigators, who chose to focus exclusively on the head wound. The complete failure to analyze the trajectory of the bullet or to check the glass beside his bed for traces of sedatives or drugs suggested a level of medical examiner negligence that was either breathtakingly incompetent or deliberately orchestrated to support a predetermined conclusion, leaving the scientific truth of his final moments permanently shrouded in shadow. As the alternative theories gained traction, a dark and disturbing pattern of behavior targeting George Reeves in the months leading up to his death began to come to light. Following his brutal breakup with Toni Mannix, Reeves became the target of a relentless, highly sophisticated campaign of harassment that turned his life into a living nightmare. He began receiving terrifying, anonymous phone calls at all hours of the night, with the voice on the other end remaining silent or whispering vague, lethal threats before hanging up. His beloved pet dog was mysteriously kidnapped from his yard, only to be found dead days later on a nearby road, a cruel act of psychological warfare designed to shatter his nerves. Most terrifying of all were a series of highly unusual mechanical failures involving his luxury station wagon. On 2 separate occasions, the brakes on his vehicle completely failed while he was navigating the steep, treacherous winding roads of Benedict Canyon, forcing him to steer into the hillside to avoid a fatal plunge. A private mechanic who inspected the vehicle later informed Reeves that the brake lines appeared to have been deliberately cut or manipulated by someone with expert knowledge. Reeves became increasingly paranoid, telling his mother and close friends that someone was actively trying to kill him, and he began keeping the heavy Luger pistol loaded in his bedroom drawer for personal protection. This systemic campaign of terror directly challenges the image of a man suffering from simple career depression, suggesting instead that he was a man running for his absolute life, fully aware that a ruthless adversary was closing in for the final strike. To make sense of the mysteries surrounding George Reeves, one must evaluate the 3 distinct paths of probability that have emerged from the historical record, each involving a completely different set of actors and motives. The first path is the official story, a tragic, alcohol-fueled suicide by a depressed actor who felt completely trapped by his career failure and chose a definitive exit. The second path points a finger of intense suspicion directly at his fiancée, Leonore Lemon, given her well-documented history of volatile rages and the intense domestic arguments that neighbors reported hearing from the house that week. It is highly possible that a late-night, drunken dispute escalated into an accidental or deliberate shooting, with the remaining guests helping to cover up the crime to protect her from the gas chamber. The third, and most chilling path, leads directly back to the Mannix estate. According to this theory, Eddie Mannix, operating at the frantic request of his devastated wife Toni, hired a professional contract killer from the Hollywood underworld to infiltrate the Benedict Canyon home and eliminate the actor, staging the entire scene as a suicide with the direct assistance of corrupt LAPD officers who answered to the studio boss. Each of these paths is supported by a compelling mix of circumstantial evidence and witness anomalies, and because the original investigation was so thoroughly compromised, it remains completely impossible to definitively eliminate any of them, leaving the true identity of the shooter an open, bleeding wound in the history of American crime. While the police department was eager to let the case fade into obscurity, George Reeves' fiercely devoted mother, Helen Besselo, launched a relentless, one-woman crusade to prove that her beloved son had been foully murdered. Refusing to accept the humiliating stigma of suicide, Besselo utilized her substantial resources to hire a legendary Beverly Hills private investigator named Milo Spirillo and a team of independent forensic specialists to reopen the case. Spirillo immediately uncovered a wealth of hidden evidence, including the extra bullet holes in the floor and testimonies from neighbors who reported seeing a mysterious dark sedan speeding away from the Canyon home minutes before the party guests ever called the police. Besselo publicly accused the LAPD of a massive cover-up, openly stating that her son was in excellent spirits, looking forward to upcoming projects, and would never have abandoned her or his young fans through an act of self-destruction. She pushed for a formal grand jury investigation and demanded that the body be exhumed for a secondary, independent autopsy, a legal battle that dragged on for years and kept the controversy alive on the front pages of national newspapers. Though her tireless efforts were consistently blocked by the bureaucratic walls of the Los Angeles legal establishment and the immense influence of the studio system, her public crusade successfully permanently shattered the official consensus, ensuring that the suicide label would forever be accompanied by a massive asterisk of public doubt. In the decades following the violent death of George Reeves, a strange and unsettling phenomenon began to grip the entertainment industry, transforming his individual tragedy into the foundational chapter of what became known as the Superman curse. Hollywood insiders and superstitious fans began to notice an eerie, recurring pattern of disaster, severe injury, and tragic misfortune affecting nearly every creative individual who attempted to don the iconic red cape of the Man of Steel. The most famous and heartbreaking manifestation of this pattern occurred decades later to Christopher Reeve, the brilliantly talented star of the 1978 cinematic masterpiece, who was left completely paralyzed from the neck down following a horrific equestrian accident at the height of his career. Other actors who stepped into the role found their careers completely destroyed by sudden illness, severe psychological breakdowns, or immediate professional obscurity, their lives systematically unraveled by the weight of the character. Even the creative writers and artists who originally created the comic book character, Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster, spent their lives in bitter poverty and legal obscurity, stripped of the billions of dollars their creation generated. This persistent pattern of tragedy transformed the role of Superman from a coveted professional honor into a highly dangerous chalice, causing modern actors to hesitate before accepting the part, and reinforcing a dark, cultural belief that some ancient, malevolent energy continues to hover around the character, demanding a terrible price from anyone who dares to fly too close to the sun. While the conspiracy theories involving mob hits and jilted lovers are undeniably compelling, a powerful and grounded alternative perspective exists, one that views George Reeves' death as the tragic, predictable culmination of a profound midlife crisis and severe substance abuse. Mainstream biographers point out that on the night of June 15, Reeves had consumed an enormous, toxic amount of alcohol, a depressant that would have severely impaired his judgment and amplified his deepest, darkest insecurities. He was facing a bleak financial future, his physical health was deteriorating due to an injury sustained in a recent motorcycle accident, and he was deeply terrified of turning 46 without any viable career prospects outside of a juvenile television show. In this view, when he walked up those stairs away from the chaotic party in his living room, the crushing weight of his reality simply became too heavy to bear, and in a sudden, impulsive moment of alcohol-induced despair, he reached for the loaded Luger pistol to permanently silence his pain. Proponents of this theory suggest that the extra bullet holes in the floor were simply the result of a previous, unrecorded instance of reckless behavior by a heavily intoxicated man playing with weapons. This perspective reframes the mystery as a deeply human tragedy, demonstrating how a proud, exceptionally talented man can be completely consumed by the brutal pressures of fame and the agonizing realization that his greatest professional achievement had become his permanent creative cage. As the years bled into decades, the primary actors in the Benedict Canyon drama quietly vanished from the stage, taking the definitive secrets of that June night with them to their graves. Leonore Lemon quickly fled Hollywood, returning to the anonymity of New York high society and refusing to ever speak publicly about the shooting again until her death in 1989. Toni Mannix spent her final years housebound in her lavish estate, suffering from severe dementia and reportedly spending her final lucid hours confessing to a Catholic priest about her deep, agonizing guilt over the fate of George Reeves, though the specific details of that confession remain protected by the sacred seal of the confessional. Eddie Mannix passed away in 1963, his extensive private files and surveillance records systematically shredded by studio assistants before his estate could be settled. The house at 1579, Benedict Canyon Drive has changed hands multiple times, with subsequent owners reporting eerie, unexplained phenomena, cold spots, and the spectral sight of a man in a bathrobe standing at the top of the stairs. The physical evidence has completely vanished from the police lockers, the original witnesses are entirely gone, and the official files remain frozen in their ambiguous verdict of suicide, leaving modern researchers to sift through the fading embers of a historical cover-up that successfully protected the powerful at the expense of a fallen hero's name. More than 6 decades after that single gunshot shattered the quiet of the canyon, the true nature of George Reeves' death remains a profound, haunting question mark in the annals of American cultural history. The official verdict of suicide stands as the legal truth, a pristine bureaucratic stamp that attempts to close a chapter that millions of fans across the globe recognize as fundamentally incomplete. Was he a tragic casualty of his own personal struggles and career despair, or was he a brave, compromised visionary who was cold-bloodedly eliminated by the ruthless forces managing the old studio system? The forensic anomalies, the extra bullet holes, the wiped weapon, and the convenient, frantic rush to judgment all point toward a truth far more complex and darker than the official file allows. As long as his episodes continue to play on classic television networks and his heroic image continues to inspire those who remember his grace, the quest for the true story of his final hours remains alive, refusing to be buried by the passage of time. George Reeves gave a generation a voice of pure, unadulterated hope, but the circumstances of his departure left a permanent, dark shadow over the entire landscape of American television, a reminder that for the icons who dare to embody absolute perfection on the screen, the real world is often a place where truth is the first casualty, and justice remains forever unresolved. Before you go, here's the thing. Every week we investigate another mystery the world could never solve. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one. And here's the most important part. The next case we investigate could be yours. Tell us in the comments which unsolved mystery, disappearance, or disaster we should cover next. We read every suggestion, and the stories that stay with you are the ones we bring to life.